The biggest React Native survey of all time just released the results. Over 3,000 participants gave their opinions on tools, libraries, everything related to React Native. Because there are like 18 sections in that whole survey, I will give you a quick overview of all the important points for each of those sections so you don't have to read through everything. Let's do a little speed run. Alright, so this is the State of React Native 2024 survey. This happened over the last 3 or 4 years by now, so we've got some backstory in some categories and we're gonna dive straight into the developer background. By the way, link to that survey below this video as well, because if you want the full information and dive into all those statistics, check them out. We're just gonna take a look at a couple of like the main interesting points for each of those sections. Developer background, what's your background in the software development? I think it's interesting to point out that, can we go into this? Nice. That most people, of course, coming to React Native are React developers, and second, the usual front-end developers. However, the third place with back-end developers is still quite strong with 37%, meaning it's super easy to get into React Native even as a backend developer, which you probably use Python or Go or Rust or whatever. And also, it's not uncommon to just get started with React Native. So I usually get that question, can I just dive into React Native instead of learning React? And I'm like, yeah, just get started. You're usually fine if you start that way as well. Then something I encounter is that the usage type was 85% professionally. So 85% of people use it professionally. However, if we then go down to the mobile app team size, we're going to see that most mobile app team sizes are actually just a solo developer, meaning like these 85% which use it at work, they're just solo developer at work, which is, I mean, quite interesting. I mean, 27 for these bigger teams is still common, but this also shows that using React Native means you can actually be a solo developer at a company. You can be a team of one, and you can ship an iOS app, you can ship an Android app, you can even ship a web application or go for a TV screen. So React Native, in that sense, gives you superpowers as a company or as the mobile team in that company. Beyond that, the target platforms mostly stay the same. So we have Android and iOS, of course, the majority of people. However, web is kind of strong with 22%. It's just good to see that all the other platforms here are increasing slightly as well, especially like Android TV and tvOS. I think this is going to be an interesting trend in the future, and I will definitely keep an eye on more apps for TV devices. Demographics in those surveys are usually, well, it's hard. I mean, you're gonna see mostly US, India, and then something from Europe here, a bit of South America. In general, the participation, as we know, it's challenging between male and female. I would love to see more female participation, but that comes from the problem that not a lot of React Native developers are female in the first place, so they can't take place. So we have like more structural problems to talk about. But what we can say is that in terms of the income, which is usually interesting for React Native developers or aspiring developers, there's quite a lot going on. So if you're a React Native developer, you're most likely looking at 50 to 100 or even 100 to 200K salary, which is, I think, pretty wild. So I think I was more in this when I got started, and it's not uncommon, but this I think looks pretty good. So if you're not sure if React Native will actually pay the bill, I'm pretty sure it will. Platform APIs is a usual interesting category. It just lists all these APIs that people use, and it's no surprise that camera and notifications or stuff like that is at the top of the list because everyone's adding that to an application, just trying it out. However, what I found interesting is that persistent storage here is actually climbing to rank 5. Which is a bit up from like last year, place 9 or something. So I think people are a bit more interested in the general local first trends, which is emerging. So that's why persistent storage becomes more important. Beyond that, people really value deep links. That's not clear to me, or wasn't clear to me initially, because it's such a, well, yeah, it's a challenging feature. But if you think about it, most applications require this to jump straight into a page. If you think about the Amazon app, you can dive straight into a product, or you can dive straight into a tweet or an article in applications. And it's no surprise actually that both deep links and notifications have like a slightly negative ratio up here. That's simply because the integration is so painful. So I really hope this is going to be easier in the future, and I'm pretty sure it will. Because also Katie gave down here her thoughts on this. And beyond Expo router making deep links and stuff easier, she's also saying that ones to watch for Expo developers are definitely maps, video, and audio with the corresponding Expo SDK libraries, all of getting a refresh this year. I think we've already seen the refresh for video and audio becoming separate packages from Expo AV to Expo Audio and Expo Video. I wasn't aware of the map changes, but I'm definitely looking forward to those as well. The library section is quite challenging to describe because beyond these initial results of everyone's using inline styling and React built-ins and the fetch API, are like 52 other things that people use, libraries, some more popular, some less popular, and we will get to them once we get to their according categories, meaning state, UI, or data fetching. But interestingly is definitely, if you scroll down here, this cool chart, which you can also separate into the different categories. So maybe we're gonna zoom out a tiny bit here. Well, that then goes a lot. But anyway, then we can also go back in. So for state management, the only thing that's really on the rise is actually Zustand. We got some solutions down here, but Zustand definitely dominates. And you see this also in the Rising JS Star survey or other surveys, that Zustand is becoming the go-to state management for pretty much everyone. In terms of data fetching, 10-state query is also on the rise. Fetch and Axios are still popular, but this one is just becoming more and more popular. In terms of navigation, there's no package that beats Expo Router. Expo Router has just a great trajectory. I love Expo Router since the first day as I've using it. It's just like, to me, Expo Router is the future. I've talked with Evan on the podcast before. You can listen to that episode recently. They're just not a whole lot of reasons to just use React navigation anymore because it's used under the hood of Expo Router anyway, and with Expo Router we get so many additional benefits that it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I expect this to rise even more. In terms of styling, we see inline styling continuing its rise. We're gonna come back to that in a second. It's quite interesting that under graphics, both the built-in animated API is definitely falling out of fashion. Lottie as well. We've seen new packages from MacroSavvy, which has like the Scotty, which is faster Lottie. And down here we have some 3D packages. We're gonna come back to that as well. In terms of component libraries, you're gonna see there's pretty much nothing here in terms of positive to say about component libraries. They're all down here. Some of them are rising a bit up, but mostly you're gonna see if we come to the next sections that component libraries are kind of falling out of fashion. So we've touched upon state management already quite a bit before because you've seen Zustand on the rise. And you're going to see the same here. The only thing that's really making consistent gains year after year is Zustand. Redux Toolkit is still quite popular with 61%, actually still above Zustand. I don't know if we can pass it over the next year. And of course, the React built-ins like the context API is strong and totally fine to use in most applications. Beyond that, I actually gave some words on that category myself, so probably it's best if I just read them. So Zustand continues its rise to as the go-to modern state management library, offering a refreshingly simple developer experience. Besides the React built-ins, no other libraries leaves developers with such a positive experience after using it, which also shows that using the context API is still extremely popular and actually an acceptable solution for the needs of most small apps. Then we're going to talk about server state. We're going to get to that as well. The biggest challenge for state management remains synchronization. So people gave that as a result. Async storage just isn't up by the challenges of today compared to solutions like MMKV from MacroSavvy. And especially with the growing shift towards local first approaches, developers are craving seamless app to backend sync mechanism. I actually really wrote that kind of nice. I gotta admit, like, I like my words here. You can sometimes like your words, don't you? I'm allowed to like my own words from time to time. Okay, so that's my take on the whole thing. Use context API if you get your app where you want to go. Use Zustand if you want to use the latest tools. And I've also talked about this in my video about the tech stack for React Native in 2025. I don't think there's too much to say about data fetching. Like, we can all fetch our data. Some people use Fetch and Axios, which are very much at the top. This is just traditionally I usually try to rely on fetch these days and not install yet another library like Axios, or even better, I use 10-stack query, which is the only thing that's currently on vogue and trending and just growing. This is also my recommendation. Just use 10-stack query in most cases because people mostly encountered problems with caching. And if you use 10-stack query, you shouldn't really experience it. I mean, you might have problems managing the cache, but it will take care of caching for your application. So if this is the biggest problem you have with fetch or Axios, then go for 10-stack and you will have a great time data fetching in your React Native app. In terms of navigation, I already said it, Expo Router is the big success story. There's nothing that's growing as crazy as Expo Router here. The blue line is Expo Router. React navigation is a bit declining. We got React Native screens as a new data point in here. Interesting, yeah, that's used in most applications. But anyway, I expect this trajectory to go up. So next year we might actually surpass 80% usage here of Expo Router. The biggest problem with Expo Router remains in terms of pain points here. If you check out these answers, like the docs need to be revisited, the Expo Router is overly complex, doesn't support something, but usually you're gonna see answers in terms of documentation related issues. So I, and of course also the Expo team itself, is aware of this, and I'm trying to come up with a new video over the next time to talk about Expo Router. So if you have questions about Expo Router, please drop them in the comments. I'm super interested in that. I had a live stream like 1.5 years ago, which was super popular about Expo Router, but it wasn't so structured. So I'm trying to give you a better resource, and let me know what you would like to see more about Expo Router. I remember that styling last year was an interesting category, and it still is always one in React Native, because there's no great built-in solution, or maybe there is, because if we look at the stats, Stylesheet API is actually on the rise. It's growing. And the second place here, actually inline styling is growing, and the second place is Stylesheet API, but nonetheless, those two are in the top place. And the only other thing that's really showing consistent growth is Native Wind. I'm a big fan of Native Wind. I said this in my Tech Stack 2025 video. I'm currently using Native Wind for all my new applications because it just gives me an edge in terms of the development speed. Plus, if I want to go for the web, Native Wind is perfectly suited for that. However, other libraries, of course, like Unistyles are great in that regards as well. But anyway, overall, it just looks like people like inline styling and like the Stylesheet API that's available in React Native. However, Jacek here from Native Wind and of course GoFonet Codemask gave an interesting take on this, why this might be the case. So perhaps all these extra features aren't truly necessary. I think that's an interesting idea because there are great libraries like Unistyles, which offers like great performance and responsive and like all these cool things. But do developers really need them or want them? This is an interesting take. I'm definitely keeping an eye on this. And he also had a great conclusion here. That ideally libraries should be cross-platform, maintain parity with web styling, be simple, and offer easy customization. Whichever library meets these needs could become the leading styling solution for React Native. I'm highly looking forward to having a leading styling solution. I mean, right now that's the Stylesheet API, but I think there's potential. My current bet is on Native Wind just because of the popularity of Tailwind on the web and most developers coming from React to React Native and just gonna opt into Native Wind by default. But if a better styling solution comes out that covers all of these topics, I'm super interested and would love to see it grow. The graphic and animations category doesn't really have any surprises for me. There are two things that stand out to me. React Native Reanimated is one of the best libraries, and React Native Skia is also on the rise. These two are my favorite libraries. React Native Reanimated just announced, or a couple of weeks ago, had version 4 announced with CSS support, which makes it even easier to add animations, and React Native Skia is also getting better all the time, especially in terms of 3D rendering using the GPU. And Vadim gave a nice quote on this. The future of React Native animations and graphics has never looked more exciting. I completely agree to Vadim's take on this because the solutions are already great and they just keep getting better. And we benefit from those advancements, may it be CSS or may it be new 3D advancements. So keep an eye on those packages and be happy that we have those solutions with React Native. For component libraries, we can make this quick. Most of them are out of fashion or falling out of fashion. That trend was already apparent last year. I don't think maybe this one here is growing a bit, but overall the usage, the adoption, the interest in these packages is just completely declining. Maybe, yeah, of course, React Native SVG is still super important, but beyond that, Michael gave an interesting take here as well on these. So this could signal, where is the quote? This could signal a shift in how developers approach UI development in React Native apps, moving away from pre-built UI kits in favor of more flexible, web-inspired styling solutions. We see this with Native Wind. Unistyles also gives us that ability and some other libraries. But overall, I'm actually really not a big fan of those UI component libraries anymore. And I think this trend will just continue over 2025. I wanted to start my debugging and profiling resume with bad news because they actually announced the removal of console logs in your debugging. But apparently that was pulled back quite fast, actually, after a lot of backlash. So you can now use the -- client logs to bring those back in with React Native 0.78. So big announcement and then rolling back a bit. However, in terms of debugging and profiling, the React Native dev tools came out last year, and I think they're the way to go. So they're accepted pretty well already up here. I don't know, yeah, the React dev tools are still in here, the Element and Sphere Console API. These are the things people use, but beyond that, of course, Reactotron and other things still have a place, as I said in my tech stack video as well. But we're mostly gonna see that React Native DevTools are the way to go. They will get better in 2025. With Expo, you can already inspect your network calls. That will be also integrated in the DevTools. We will have better debugging or better profiling views in that. So all of that is already on the roadmap. There are a couple of tools that are interesting, I think, in terms of debugging, which are like the Radon IDE, which is the IDE for React Native. Or we got Flashlight for inspecting the performance of your app. They don't have a huge adoption yet, but it's good to know about these tools. So if you're limited with the React Native dev tools, there are still some other solutions, but we will keep an eye on that, how they develop over time. In terms of testing and monitoring, no big surprises. Jest here is at the top of the list, then followed up by React Native testing library and Storybook, which has a quite high adoption. So I used Storybook a couple of times. It's pretty cool, but it's great to see the adoption being so high. Beyond that, I'm a big fan of Maestro UI tests, Appium slowly falling out of fashion. Beyond that, I think it's interesting to mention that in terms of analytics, pretty much everyone's using Firebase Analytics, and I honestly don't know why. I'm not the biggest fan of Firebase. I think it's cool, but in my own apps, I currently use more a mix of Mixpanel or Posttalk to do my analytics, which feels a lot better. You can also see it in terms of the what is it called? Like, it's a positive sentiment here. 17% or even 28% for Posttalk, showing that those SDKs actually might do a better job than the traditionally used Firebase Analytics. So if you're looking for a new analytics tool, maybe give one of those a try. And beyond that, pretty much everyone's using Sentry, and I can highly recommend Sentry for crash reporting or monitoring. They also introduced last year mobile session replays. I've shown you this in some of my clone videos, where you can pretty much step through what a user did before a crash happened. You can even use this sort of like to monitor your application and see what users are doing. It's incredible. I really love Sentry and what they do, and you will see me continue to use Sentry across all my videos, whether it's about my own apps or the clones that we build. Sentry is definitely my choice for crash reporting. Now, we all know React Native rolled out the new architecture in 2024. There's a whole point about the React Native architecture here. And well, while there are some interesting technologies in here, it's overall just interesting to see that the new architecture already has an adoption of almost 50% after that short time. I think that's really great to see. This trend will of course continue to grow to probably above 60% or even more this year. And beyond that, I think it's important to point out that, where was it? Somewhere down here. So most people are actually quite current with React Native. And the usual update strategy is to either stay on the latest version or upgrade in parallel with Expo SDK releases. So people really have that assumption that new Expo SDK means new React Native, which isn't too wrong given that Expo is the recommended React Native framework. So I think staying on the latest version is always great. However, upgrading in parallel with Expo SDK releases is definitely acceptable and probably the most reliable solution. It's like the stable package of upgrade strategy. It's also worth pointing out in terms of mobile web and code sharing that most people here just use React Native Web, or 92% actually say Node code sharing, independent project for web and native. This almost makes me sad because with Expo Web, there's so much you can do by now that it's really not required to spin up another Next.js or whatever front end. I think this is maybe also traditionally, given that most people have done this in the past, as it still was the best way to get like best of both worlds. I predict that this will change over the next time as more and more people see that with Expo Router and Expo Web, it is increasingly easy to ship your app. You have API routes, you have React Native server components, everything under one hood in one project. This is just peak productivity, and I will release a video on that very soon as well, because I think going forward, for me, this is the way how I want to build apps. We can make the build and publish section quite fast. Most people love to use EAS. EAS is on the rise. I love to use it as well. You just run one command in your React Native project, it uploads the code, it builds in the cloud, it submits your app to iOS and Android, even puts it into test flight. Like, there's nothing that beats EAS to me. And honestly, I've been on a free plan for a very long time and was still super helpful, because I don't care if my app build takes 5 or 8 hours. If I fix something and put it onto EAS build in the evening, next morning I can submit it as a new version in iOS and Android, and I'm totally cool with that. So there's really no reason not to use EAS build at this point anymore. The DevTools category section doesn't really hold any surprises. Most people use the usual suspect like the Expo Go application, the Expo CLI, the EAS CLI, a bit of Expo Snag, like all the Expo tools that you might be familiar with. Beyond that, what I found surprising is that there was actually something about AI code generation, and still 11% don't use any AI code generation, and 33% of people just use 12% code generation, no matter how, like, I don't know how you can say my code is 12% or 25%. But anyway, this is hopefully going to grow over the next time, because as a developer, we really need to embrace these tools, not in that way of like, oh, I built an application in 2 hours with those no-code tools. No, that's not what I mean. I really mean, like, we have a blank page and going from zero to your first draft. That's perfect for AI. Just put in your requirements in a structured way, which brings us a bit to AI prompt engineering, and you will move so much faster. So iterating from something on the page to something else is way quicker than starting from zero and putting everything on the page. So I highly recommend, if you haven't been using AI, if you are among those 11% of respondents here, go give it a try. No matter if you're using like Cursor or Copilot, but I really recommend you use Cursor with Claude Sonnet, then you're gonna have a great time with these tools. Then there was also a nice comment here from Cedric and Gabriel. So there's a clear trend of companies investing to support React Native and Expo with AI, such as we've currently seen it with Replit, Stackblades, Bolt.new, Google's Project IDE, and we expect more and more developers to embrace it in one form or another on a daily basis. So Expo is really expecting this trend to continue as well. Beyond that, once again regarding the general DevTools, the momentum of React Native DevTools continues to speed up, with Meta focusing on the foundation through the Chrome DevTools protocol, making React Native DevTools better. 2025 will be an even more exciting year for developers, and I completely agree with this. the current trend and the work that these companies put into the dev tools, Expo also with their dev plugins that you can use, I think we are up for a really exciting 2025. All right, other cross-platform frameworks. One of my favorite sections as the previous, what was my name? Captain Ionic, right? Here we go. Swift UI and Flutter are mostly among the top contenders as alternatives. And I think Flutter is honestly really the only real competitor. Swift UI is different, Swift UI is great, but we will probably also have access to Swift UI in React Native at some point, which I'm really looking forward to a lot. Ionic is slowly declining. They had some interesting news coming out this year, so I expect this to go down over the next time. Just as why is Cordova still on that list? Just use Capacitor if you use any of those tools. But anyway, I think really the only worthy competitor at this point is Flutter, which has its advantages. It's getting better as well all the time. I will keep an eye on it, but so far I think React Native is just the superior choice for cross-platform applications. All right, I don't want to say too much about the resources section because it's quite boring, but I want to say a big thank you. So I've been mentioned here with galaxies.dev in place 15 of learning resources, and I've been also mentioned in the creators category. So the podcast Rocket Ship rose to place 2. That is unbelievable. So after React Native Radio, you're listening to Rocket Ship. Thank you so much. If you're not yet, subscribe to the Rocket Ship podcast on your preferred platform. And also for the video creators, I'm right here after Theo. That gives me goosebumps. Thank you so much for voting for me in this category, as well as down here to people overall where I come in after these legends like Evan Bacon and Dan Abramov. So thank you so much for voting for me. I will try my best to put out the React Native resources that you want. Whenever you have a question, leave a comment. I read through them every week. Ping me on X or send me an email. You know my email. And I try to follow up on most of those emails. So thank you again, and I will always try to give you the resources to get into React Native and build and ship epic apps. The survey finally concludes with opinions, and just like last year, React Native is definitely heading in the right direction. 48% of people agree and 40% even strongly agree, and people don't think that building React Native apps is overly complex. So it definitely shows React Native is on the right trajectory. There's something here. Jamin had a great opinion about all these things. React Native pain points is always interesting to see. So unmaintained packages has climbed to place 1, surpassing debugging. And I think debugging will continue to decline as React Native DevTools get better. Unmaintained packages, I don't know, it will probably stay up here. I don't know what we can do about this, and I also don't know what we can do about keyboard handling. I'm really puzzled. I hope this will get better over the next time. However, there was also missing features. So again, better debugging, that will come. Better keyboard handling, I don't know, but Expo should certainly do something about this. And then there was better flat list. There is definitely coming something on the horizon. We have Legend List from Jay coming up, and Flash List is supposed to have a new version as well. I don't know why lists are still that challenging in React Native, but this part will definitely get better. And I think that updating React Native apps isn't such a big problem anymore thanks to the changes of Expo. So upgrades are only coming in place 10. That's a good sign. So React Native once again moving in the right direction. All right, it actually got longer than I expected. I hope you had the chance to follow me through all these categories. Last year I said maybe React Native is going to hit version 1.0.
React Native might hit version 1 this year.
But that of course didn't happen. Maybe this year I will predict, or I wish it would happen, because it would just give a signal to many companies. It's just a tiny thing, but I think React Native is at a point where it's ready for version 1.0. What are you most excited about React Native in 2025? Let me know in the comments. I love to see your takes on the state of React Native. My personal take, we had a really exciting 2024 with new architecture and new things coming out, and I think 2025 will be even more exciting probably. However, on a different level. level, because 2024 was like breaking a lot of things, introducing a lot of new things, and I think in 2025 we will just gradually see those tools become better. Reanimated getting CSS support, we see better 3D support, we have improved debugging with the React Native DevTools getting more and more capabilities, and just Expo Router getting better, probably also having a rename, and just in general a bit more stability, but still improved tools. So that means if you're on the latest versions, the latest tools, if you're up to date with what's going on in the React Native world, and especially your apps are up to date with that, then you will directly benefit from all these advancements, but just following the improvements that these packages get. To stay current, subscribe to this channel and also check out galaxies.dev, which by the way also has a weekly newsletter. So you didn't vote for the newsletter in that category, but even the free members of Galaxies get a weekly newsletter where I highlight some of the most important updates of the system. Head over to Galaxies, create a free account. You can also sign in with GitHub, and if you want to learn more, you can also check out our courses or the Zero to Hero mission, bringing you from basic React skills to a React Native experienced developer. I'd love to see you inside. I'll catch you in the next video, and until then, happy coding, Simon.